Curious about flash fiction, think you want to write it but you're not quite sure how, I've got a few tips for you, a few things that have worked for me. Let me show you. Just before I start, I make 2 writing related videos a week on a Wednesday and a Sunday. They're all aimed to help you get better at writing, so if you want writing motivation week by week, hit the subscribe button. So flash fiction then, I'm going to define what it means to me and give you an example of my flash fiction just so that you know where I'm coming from with all of this. I'm kind of on a flash fiction binge at the minute. I've written quite a few pieces in the past few months, and one of those was like a novella in flash made of 20 pieces of flash fiction that ended up getting shortlisted for a prize, so that was cool. Really into the flash fiction right now, as you can tell. I must make the point though, this is just my interpretation of flash fiction, it's just what it means to me, and also it's just my approach to it. And the flash fiction I'm going to share with you, I'm not saying this is the absolute best flash fiction that's ever been written, probably far from it, but you know, I didn't want to get hit with copyright strikes from someone else using their own work, so I thought I'd just use mine. You probably already know what flash fiction is, but if you don't, to me it means a short piece of writing, usually under 1,000 words, usually under 500 when it comes to me. It's about making an impact in a short time with a short amount of words. It's about getting across some kind of emotional connection to your reader in a very short time. It's concise, it's clear, it's quick, they're really rereadable. They've just got a lot of clout, and that's what I like about them. So here's mine, it's called Protection. I wrote it recently, it's about 250 words, and I've made it into kind of a video sequence just to make it slightly more interesting. So I'll meet you back after this, and then we'll talk about how to write flash fiction. They said this would be their final house. The viewing had been in the night. They circled the block in a car with tinted windows and a twitchy driver. Barely a glimpse of the place, but they grasped hands on the leather back seat and said yes. Yes, it was perfect. Thank you. To outsiders, they might have seemed relieved. On move-in day, they gave their new names to the neighbours. I work from home, I'm a writer, just articles online. He had turned and looked down the driveway to where she stood holding a bag of sugar. She'll be working in the city, commuting, yeah. He was walking backwards by then, avoiding the wax shine of a luxury car. Oh, here and there, all over. Well, nice to meet you. Weeks later, alone, he moves from room to room, looking for traces of their old life before all of it. The parts he can feel still close as he lies awake each night. He drifts through the front door and onto the lawn. Some way away, children are playing. Cars hum to themselves as they go. There are perennials to be housed beneath the kitchen window. They'll make roots. Soon it'll be like they were always there. He stands back to shrug at his work when a car creeping past backfires. The same ducking and twisting, but he finds himself void of the old fear. She parks. From the car she sees the kitchen window, spider-webbed. Inside, a small hole in the wall, just about head height. The lights are off. She calls out to him. Okay, there's my example. So it's short, it's punchy, it's, you know, a story. The first step to any flash fiction for me is to narrow down my idea. Now, in your mind you probably already have like a setting, or maybe you've got some characters, or you've got something that happens that you want to include in your flash fiction or base your flash fiction around. That's great. What I want you to do is narrow that down. Push it down, make sure you focus in on what's really important about that story. What's going to matter to the reader, what's going to make an emotional connection to them. I tend to call that, in my brain, I tend to call that the fire of the story. It's got warmth, it's got light, and it's got life. It's where everything comes from. All of your story's soul, or all of your story's meaning, will come from that fire. So what I want you to do is get that, focus in on it, hold it in your hand, and just make sure you keep hold of it, focus on it, and let it drive you through the rest of the story. Mine was loss, isolation, sadness, and I sprinkled those themes all through the story, both in the narrative of what actually happens and in the language that I used. I made sure the message came through loud and clear, but not too loud or too clear, but I focused on that. That's what drove me through the story. So the next step is to write a good opening, obviously. It has to be snappy, it has to be attention grabbing, but that's not all. What I like to do is take that fire that I've already figured out from step one and apply that to my opening line so that it kind of gives an idea of what the whole story is going to be about. It's good to let the reader know exactly what they're in for, even if you don't tell them outright. I kind of did with mine. If we look at mine, it just says they said this would be their final house. So I'm asking a question there. Will it be their final house? The reader doesn't know. The reader also doesn't know, like, that's weird, right? Will it be their final house? Why would it be their final house? What's happened to make them need a final house? Are they just, what's going on? The next part is the middle, which is usually the toughest part of any kind of writing. No exception for flash fiction. The thing to remember here is not to fall into a narrative trap. Don't just focus on what's physically happening to your characters during this. If you can weave your fire or your meaning into what is actually happening in your flash fiction, all the better. Notice I did this by splitting up the characters. They're always standing away from each other or they're on their own. So those physical actions are mirroring the themes that I'm trying to get across. And remember that the middle of your flash fiction, this portion, that's the heart of your flash fiction. So whatever the idea was that you had in your first place, this is the place where you make that happen. Another good tip to remember is flash fiction is all about the small moments, the tiny granular detail of what's happening on a very small scale or a very large scale at once. So it doesn't have to be covering a day or 3 days. It can cover just one moment like I have with mine. The guy stands by the perennials, then, something happens. It's just one small moment. So focus on that. Lace it with fire again, get that fire, set everything on fire, spray kerosene around, light a match, drop it down, fire everywhere, that's what you want. Number 4 is the ending. Obviously a punchy ending is really important. A lot of the time flash fiction has a kind of twist or a very impactful last line. That'd be my preference too. I like to leave a mark on the reader and let them know that they've just read a story. The aim here is to pack up everything that you've said in this story, all of the themes, all of the important things you've got across, pack it up into one little package, give it to the reader and say, there you go, take that away with you. Most importantly of all, don't forget that fire that you've laced your whole story through with. That needs to be in the ending too, because the most important part of that is that right when you get to the end, that light, that warmth, that life from that fire goes out. And you leave the reader with nothing, and that is a lot of the time where that emotional depth comes from. So if we look at my story, for example, the lights go off, I'm literally removing light and life and possibly warmth from the room, and she's alone. She calls out to him, there's no response, the fire's gone out, there's no life left in the story, it's dead. That kind of ending is going to stick with a reader a little bit more. The great thing about flash fiction is that it's quick to edit because it's so short. You don't have to spend weeks and weeks and weeks on a flash fiction. You can if you want, but the thing is you can write the first draft and maybe it's not quite what you wanted. That's fine. You can rework it and rework it and rework it. Writing is not a live performance, so don't expect to get it perfect, this massive, weighty, emotional piece of genius writing, 250 words in the first go. Of course you're not going to do that. But just keep trying at it, keep working at it, keep that idea, keep your fire in mind, and as long as you stick to that, focus on that when you're writing, you're going to write something great. I do have another flash fiction story on my channel as a video. It's called Oxblood. I'll link it just up there if you're interested in going to see another piece of my work. I make 2 writing related videos a week on a Sunday and a Wednesday, as I said, so hit the subscribe button. Try flash fiction out for yourself, do it, it's well worth it. Come back and let me know you did it. Thanks for watching, see ya.